Hey, I've been playing a lot of video games this week and yeah, it's been for work. We've been testing out and using the new customizable PS5 controllers from MegaModz and we've been having a lot of fun. I'll be sharing my experience designing and customizing this controller, the look and feel of using it. I'll also be sharing my perspective as a first-time modded controller user and some of the things that I really like about having these customizable macros on the back, as well as some of the mods that you can get with them, as well as some of the difficulties getting everything set up and working. And then so if you've never gotten a customizable controller, or if you've never heard of MegaModz, this is actually a PS5 controller just with a lot of different color options that you normally would never see or think of, as well as, of course, this really smart mod chip on the back, which opens a lot of options for how you actually control your character in whatever game you're playing because of the different mods and macro remapping that you can do with it. When you receive your controller, it's going to come in a box like this, which includes the same user manual that you get with a regular PS5 controller, as well as 2 additional manuals, which have a quick setup guide for how all your controls and mods work, as well as some QR links to additional resources, which you'll definitely need to look into and research for some time, and then a quick diagram of how to actually turn on your mod chip and get it started. And so going into this review with the new perspective that I have, not having used modded controllers like this in the past, one of the things that I think would make it a lot more accessible to users like myself would be to have some kind of accompanying app that allows me to make the changes to the different mods and macros that I want assigned with like a mobile app, as opposed to having to go through this complicated menu system, which does take a lot of time to figure out. And even when you do figure it out, you then have to know what each color code means. So you'll have to be referring to your manual or your phone, which has your manual on there a lot of the times, just to know what's enabled and how to switch between the different mods that you want. But especially during this learning process of figuring out what the mods do, how they work, which ones are kind of compatible with your playstyle or the games that you want to use with it, that's going to be the most frustrating part going into this as a beginner user. So for starters, let's talk about its customization, its look, and its build quality. If you're not that creative or you don't want to go through every customization option, there's actually pre-designed models that you can choose from that have various different designs as well as modded chips added to them already. In my case, I wanted to get the full experience of making my very own controller, so I went through the controller creator process. First option you have is upgrading your hardware back buttons, which are these 2 here. I went with the advanced back buttons over the macro remap because doing so allows you to upgrade your mod chip so you can have those multi-mod packages installed. The next option you have is to upgrade your back buttons, which reduces the travel time required for a full click to be made. In addition to it being out of stock right now, I didn't choose to go with that upgrade option. From what I was reading and researching with those buttons, it seems to reduce the effect of those resistant triggers that these Sony PS5 controllers are well known for. So especially when you're doing shooting games and you like half click or you feel that little resistance when you're pressing down on the button, it reduces that when you don't have as much travel. And tied in with that, the other drawback to using hair triggers is that for certain games that require pressure, and I think a lot of those include like racing games where the more pressure you put, it's the faster, the more gas, the faster your car is going to go. And so that limits the amount of precisions that you can get when using your triggers. So I kind of wanted to still have that experience, so I decided to not go with that upgrade. And then similar to that, you can also upgrade the mechanical face button so that there's less travel with that. I don't believe that was originally an option when customizing my controller, so that's something you might want to do. Now, when selecting your mods, that's obviously one of the biggest selling features of a customizable controller like this, aside from making your own design, which we'll get to, but this is also where it can get really expensive quickly. They have several mod packs which you can select between, which have several mods pre-installed on the chip that you can select and choose. And it can get really interesting here because the way a lot of these mods work, sometimes they're actually taking advantage of glitches in games. So sometimes they're only compatible with certain games, and actually sometimes they can be patched out of games. In many ways, they're basically glitching out the game to take advantage of some of those effects. So on their site, you can actually see a history of the mods that were compatible with the controllers as well as ones that were later patched out. Just keep those in mind, especially if you're new to this whole custom gaming controller, custom mods with your controller. And so now we can move on to the exterior design, which in my opinion is the most fun part of making your custom controller. You'll start by configuring your exterior body, which is where you see this nice light blue that I've selected. They have their colors divided into the original colors, solid colors, custom designs, hydro dripped, and chrome. So in my case, I picked the heaven blue, which is under solid colors. They also have the custom designs, which have things like tropical flamingo, dark matter, Gold Nebula, Alpha Nero, and a couple other cool theme designs as well. In my opinion, those just feel too pre-configured, and I wanted to go for a completely custom look that I had in mind. What's interesting with that is when you have your back button selected as an upgrade, it actually limits the amount of back color designs that you can pick between. Not entirely sure why. I went with the chameleon green because I thought that was the closest in fitting the theme of the rest of the controller. That said, I would have definitely liked to have the coral red, an orange, or a yellow on the back as well, as opposed to this. This was more of like a compromise because this was like the best color aside from black. And actually it appears that if you select back buttons on your controller, you can't upgrade your mechanical face buttons. Not entirely sure why the two wouldn't play nice together or why you couldn't have both, but you'll need to pick between the two. You have a lot of color options for your trim. You have standard colors, you have exotic colors, custom colors. You also have transparent colors like blue, red, green, which allow you to see some of the components underneath here. And then you have chrome, which gives you that metallic look. And then going back to what I was saying a little bit earlier, I think there's a lot of color options for the individual parts, but sometimes finding the same colors for each of the parts, if you're trying to match things up nicely, can be a little difficult because not all those colors are compatible with all those parts. So if you have a specific design in mind, that might limit you or make you rethink your overall design. Next, you can change your R1 and L1 buttons, and it has those same colors like we were talking about before. Then you can upgrade your D-pad. Where it differs from the previous color options is that now you have symbols, which is where if you opt for it, you can actually have those symbols on the actual D-pad. So this is another thing. So with mine being caution yellow, I don't have the option to have the symbols on here. And that's also a similar story with your buttons. So I really like to see my triangle, square, circle, and X icons, just because I'm always switching between controllers and I can never actually memorize which one is which. I always actually need to see them. I'm one of those people. So that actually limits your color choices here if you want to have the symbols for them. So I went with the black on orange, which also is an option for your D-pad too, but because I wanted yellow to match with the yellow trackpad, I didn't have the option to have symbols for that. Thumbsticks are the last major option that you can customize. A lot of good colors here. And then you have some interchangeable aluminum options, transparent options, and two-tone options. And so with all your customization options, your mod chip, as well as your back buttons, it's not too hard to get this to cost over $300. So holding it and looking at it in hand, it looks really premium. Even in direct light, everything looks really well put together. I do notice, however, with certain sharper edges and corners, some of the areas where the materials are wrapping around the trim do tend to have more perforations a little bit than what you'd normally see on a regular PS5 controller. It almost has me thinking that they took a regular PS5 controller, took off all the individual parts, and then put Plastidip or vinyl wrap around them in order to get this look. And now let's actually talk about using this in gaming. So we've tried this out in a couple games, mostly Call of Duty Cold War, Apex, and a few other random games here and there. The experience overall has been enjoyable, but to actually take advantage of this whole controller, there's definitely a learning curve associated with it because it's not very straightforward. Like, it's not intuitive. Like, if you just hand this to someone, they're gonna have no idea how to turn on the mod chip, select between the different mod options, or to select between different customizations with your macros on the back as well. And in my experience, I actually had a difficult time understanding the manuals. It just took a lot of time and looking at other YouTube videos and then going on their website with the included QR codes for a long time before actually figuring out how to switch between those different options. And so in this video, I'm going to be briefly talking about some of the specific ones that I was using and some of the weird quirks associated with it, but this isn't gonna be an in-depth look into every single mod that you can get and every single different option that you can switch between there, because that will put this at least over an hour. And so if you have the mod chip and the back buttons, you'll have two sets of 4 LEDs on the back of your controller.
These lights indicate the mods that you have active. So the top left button is your gun mod. There can only be one gun mod activated at a time. The second, third, and fourth light are related to the additional mods that you can have. In macro, you hold down the mod button, what you want it to be mapped to, and what you want to map. And you hold that for, I think, 3 seconds.
So all 3 of them together.
So that, and that. And then you see it change to blue on the side that you wanted it. And we can see that X is blue. So we know that we've done it. When we press it, we jump. If you press the mod button and this and hold it, that will flash green, and then it will go into your sub modes, which you increase the submodes by pressing this and decrease it by pressing that. It flashes green when it... So unlike your normal X, when you hold it, you jump once.
If you hold the X button.
When you're holding the X button,
you only jump once.
You jump once and you stop.
Right.
But when we hold the macro button programmed with X, so we're holding it down,
it'll keep going.
It acts like it's pressing the button over and over again, which you can see with
it's telling
this light.
You when it's triggered.
It's telling you every time it's pressing this X button. So right now we are going to do the auto sprint, R1 and clicking the left stick in. So we press the mod button, R1 and click the left stick in. And light blue indicates we have auto sprint on, and we know that because in the instruction guide that it gave us, it says auto sprint. It tells you what to activate, what buttons will activate it,
and what color it should turn.
It will be on the LEDs. This is 2 through 4 because it's not a gun mod, and what color it is, light blue. I am going to press in R2, which should make me sprint. And there we go. So Quickscope is represented by holding down L1. I am in the first sub mode. So when you press the mod button and hold down L1, Quickscope is represented by a red light on 2 through 4. Quickscope will fire off a shot at the apex of your scope. So I didn't even have to press to fire. It does it. So in order to change the time between the scope and the shooting, you have to have Quickscope on, hold the mod switch, tap the home button. All 4 LEDs will light up in white. Tap the L button and it'll take you to the 100th place. So this will increase the 100th place. Tap the mod switch to switch to the next digit. I'm still only pressing the scope button, and it's still automatically shooting, but because we increased that time so much, it took
enough time to actually scope.
3 seconds.
Yeah.
With rapid fire on, rapid fire is mod button and R2, I believe. Yep. Mod button and R2, and it'll be represented by a gun mod on the first light that is red. And now, if you hold this button, it just non-stop fires instead of firing one bullet. Turning your single shot pistol into an automatic pistol. And now when we turn the mod off by pressing the mod button and pressing down on the D-pad, it goes back to a single shot. In order to turn gun mods off, there's a gun mod. You press the mod button and down on the D-pad, and that clears your gun mods. To clear the 3 other mods, you press the mod button and X, mod button and X, and that clears the other 3 mods. So to turn off a macro, the top row indicates that your macros are on, the bottom row indicates they're off. So you just press the mod button and press the macro. Press the mod button, press the macro. They're off.
When playing games like Call of Duty, as someone who's like a mouse and keyboard player, I do find a lot of the macros and some of the mods that we were using to provide a more, I don't know, comparable experience that I would use with a keyboard and mouse, because my aim is pretty bad with joysticks. And so one of the mods that I really liked having enabled was the Quickscope mode. And so in my experience, one of the benefits of having mods like that, even though they're relatively simple and straightforward, is it allows you to focus on other tasks at the same time. So if you wanted to just click the one trigger in to zoom in to scope, which will then automatically fire, you can focus on aiming and then perhaps jumping at the same time, so you're harder to be hit by another target. So if you're planning on gaming a lot with this, I'm sure you can pick up those macros and you'll start to learn what button combinations you have to press in order to enter those different modes and mods and change the timing and stuff like that. I think one of the things that would make this controller a lot easier, like I was saying earlier, is some kind of app that allows me to kind of just switch the different mods that I want enabled, as opposed to having to go through this somewhat complicated and not very intuitive system of different button presses and having to know what each symbol means. So thanks again for tuning into this video. Hope that helped out. Let us know what you think about this modded controller. What do you think about this design? Until the next one, we'll catch you later.